I'm Erick Stakelbeck, and this is the U.S.-Mexico border. Folks, we are in Eagle Pass, Texas. Now, this has really been the epicenter for the border crisis here in the United States over the past 3.5 years. And yes, it is indeed a crisis. Over 10 million people have crossed into the United States from Mexico illegally in the past 3.5 years alone. We don't know who many of them are or where they are right now. Many have fanned out to parts unknown across the United States. So we came here, number one, to report on the national security implications for the United States. Secondly, the human impact. Look, we've got human and drug trafficking, smuggling, sex trafficking, all sorts of nasty things emanating from this border. And we have women, children, being found dead here. We have people trying desperately to get into this country, and yet we have a terrorist element coming. We have a criminal element coming as well. It shouldn't matter where you lie on the political spectrum. This issue matters to every American. So we will bring you the on-the-ground impact from right here where it's all happening. Again, Eagle Pass has been profoundly impacted, perhaps more than any community along the border over the past 3.5 years since Joe Biden took office. What can be done to turn this thing around? And again, what is Eagle Pass, and in a broader context, America facing as a result of what's happening on this border behind me right now? Well, we went for a ride along with the Deputy Constable of Eagle Pass, Hal Bowles, and he had some very, not only disturbing information, but important information that you need to know about. What happens on this border does not stay on this border. Let's do a ride along with Deputy Constable Hal Bowles. 12 to 15,000 people congregated right here in Eagle Pass. It has slowed in the past few months since then, and you referenced that, Hal. It was called Operation, or is called Operation Lone Star.
Yes.
Which Texas Governor Greg Abbott has put into effect, and it's made a big difference.
The effect of Operation Lone Star, it's being felt all up and down the border with the added presence of the Texas Department of Public Safety, and also along with the Texas National Guard. And here in Eagle Pass, the numbers of people that we had crossing was just overwhelming to us. And without their assistance, then we wouldn't have been able to handle it.
Yeah. So the federal government, when they were in control of the border crossing in Eagle Pass, it wasn't going too well.
I mean, I could say this: no one is really equipped to deal with 10,000 people in one day.
And this was a constant stream for about 2 years.
Yes. Yeah, for about 2 years, we're having several thousand, at least 1,000 to anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people coming across per day.
Per day?
Per day coming across.
What has been the effect on Eagle Pass?
It's changed it profoundly because Eagle Pass, Texas is just about your average American community in the United States. Our population is not that big, but the problem that we're having here is slowly starting to affect the rest of the United States.
Yes, it is.
And it's affecting our larger metropolitan cities like New York City, Chicago.
The sanctuary cities.
Yes, the phrase
So-called.
is the sanctuary cities. That's where they're going to go to because they're basically getting a free ride. Now, we all know nothing's for free.
That's right.
But who's paying for that? The American taxpayer is.
That's right.
Whether it's federal tax dollars, state tax dollars, local tax dollars, and now U.S. citizens that lived all their lives here and paid taxes, worked hard all their lives, they're saying, why are they giving all these resources to these people that came here illegally? And I've been here all my life, and I haven't gotten anything.
No, I'm struggling.
So that's what's, I think, turning the tide here slowly in our country. Yeah. Here, this area, this is the edge of Shelby Park, and you can see right there, that's the river.
That's the Rio Grande.
That's the Rio Grande.
Which can be very treacherous to cross.
Yes, it can be. And right up here, we've got our border fence.
Yeah.
It's been here a while.
You see the Mexican flag? We're right here. We're on the border.
That's Mexico right there, where you see the Mexican flag.
By the way, I see a truck that says Florida Division of Emergency Management. Talk about that, Deputy, that you have law enforcement from other states coming here to Texas to bolster the U.S.-Mexico border?
We have Florida State Troopers. We have Florida game wardens. We also have some, we've had troopers from the state of Idaho that the governor of Idaho has sent down here to come and assist Texas. We've had National Guards from several other states deploy down here on state missions to come and assist the Texas National Guard and the Texas DPS. So we've got a real heavy law enforcement National Guard presence here, and that's unfortunately that's what it's taken.
That's
what it's taken to stop this. Yes.
It's not just a local crisis. This is a national crisis.
Yeah, it doesn't just affect us here. It affects the whole of the nation, because I'm not sure which governor said it, but every state now is a border state. I don't knock these people for wanting a better life. If I was them, I would want a better life for myself, for my family as well. But there's a way of going about and doing it, and legally, and they're pretty much circumventing the system. And if they're allowed entry, then they pretty much get a piece of paper that says, hey, you promised to go to court on this date and time, and sometimes that court date is 3-4 years down the line, or it might even be an open date.
So in the meantime, where do they go? They're in the country and they go wherever they please. They may not show up for the hearing.
Exactly. They're pretty much left to their own devices, and they once they're released here, they disappear into society. I see people coming across from countries that are not friendly countries to the U.S. And they're state-sponsored countries of terrorism.
That's right.
They come across.
According to our own government, they're state-sponsored of terrorism.
We've seen people from these countries that they come here. We see people from all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising in a sense that if the border's wide open and the federal government in some ways refuses to enforce it, it's almost a flashing neon sign for people. Come on in.
Yeah,
it's almost irresistible. And I would think, especially for America's enemies, again, look, the Middle East is heating up. Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, these are people who are not friendly to the United States, and this is easy entry into the country, and then they disappear and we don't know where they are. We're here, folks, on the U.S.-Mexico border. Quite literally, you see the border wall right behind me. We're with Deputy Hal Bowles. And Deputy, look, it's been an eye-opening ride along with you, but one of the things that caught my notice and our team is that, okay, we've got the wall, which you see behind us, and that's great, it's a barrier, but then there's this big opening, no wall, no fence. What's the issue there?
Well, what we've got here is the far edge, extreme of our border wall here in Texas, and this is pretty much where it left off of when we had a change of administration in Washington.
So this was President Trump. President Trump for years obviously build the wall, we're gonna build the wall.
Yes.
And this is part of that border wall.
This is part of that border wall. And right over here over my right shoulder, about 100 to 150 yards that way, that is the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yeah.
Right there. And the only thing on that border stopping anybody from coming across is a cyclone fence. But people are literally coming up to the wire and they're having to let them in. So this is where the state got into conflict with the federal government, because the state put up that fence there to try and deter the illegal immigration. Something. And they had National Guard out there. But what was happening was the Border Patrol was letting them in. So there was kind of a go-between between the federal government and the state government. And finally, it got to the point where the governor gave the word and Shelby Park area was shut down. It had gotten almost to where everything was running on a schedule, kind of. At about 6:37 in the morning, right here in this area, we were having anywhere between 300 to 500 people cross all at the same time. And then it was a scramble to get law enforcement out here, whether it was the federal, of course, the Border Patrol making their way out here with buses and vans to pick them up, and they'll start organizing them. It's like, okay, we've got people from this country, that country. We have single males, single females, family units, mom, dad, kids, any unaccompanied children, potentially looking for what country they're from. If they're not a friendly country, the U.S. might have, organizing them. And then getting the transportation down here to take them to the processing facility and getting them out. So imagine anywhere 300 to 500 people crossing at one time and having about 10 to 12 officers trying to deal with that group. So it's chaos.
Not everyone who crosses into Eagle Pass just voluntarily gives themselves up. Some get hostile and aggressive towards you and your fellow officers.
And these people here, these are the ones that are turning themselves in. These are the ones that want to give up, that they know they're pretty much going to get allowed into the U.S. Now, the other side of the coin is we have to deal with also our gotaways, people that do not want to turn themselves in. Then sometimes we see them cross and they make their way into our neighborhood sometimes to try and get to stash houses or safe houses for them to where they can get smuggled further into the U.S.
And they don't want to be caught because they might be a terrorist. They may have a criminal record back in their country of origin.
In their country, they may be prior deports here from the U.S., which will exclude them from coming into the U.S. or being allowed to come in or to claim asylum. And that's why they don't want to get caught. We've had people with prior criminal records, anything from having a DWI all the way up to murder. Normally, we would go through our process and put a charge on them. Normally, we have to now turn them over to Border Patrol. Say, okay, here they go. They're not U.S. citizens, they're not whatever, because our local jails can't handle that.
Right.
So
it's a town of 28,000 people,
yes.
Eagle Pass, yet you're the front line of defense. I say this without exaggeration, Deputy. You've really become the front line of defense for America. Chief, thanks so much for having us. Hey, you were born and raised here in Eagle Pass. You've been in this role for about a decade. How have things changed here in your hometown, especially over the past few years?
Dramatically. It's changed dramatically. 10, 15 years ago, we weren't having any immigration issues. Past couple of years, it's been very hectic. Operation Lone Star has put a dent on the migrant crossings.
Yeah.
So it's kind of slowed down for a little bit.
But Chief, for your department, for the fire department here in Eagle Pass, you already do such brave work in your everyday job, but now you're dealing with this migrant crisis at the border, and you and your team have seen some pretty horrible things. Tell us more about that.
We've seen just about everything regarding migrants, from cuts and bruises, crossing the border, to drownings. And I'm talking about children. Just yesterday, they had a body recovery at the river.
Right, the Rio Grande, right here.
The Rio Grande River. Talking about the railroad tracks, we've had several incidents throughout the past 2 years where we've had very traumatic incidents in the railroad tracks, from suffocation inside the rail cars to accidents.
So it's generally become a very chaotic situation.
Very chaotic, very chaotic.
How has this changed the character of Eagle Pass? I'd imagine people who live here are fed up.
I think they're fed up with the whole situation itself.
Yeah. The inaction.
Yes.
Our government. Finally, Texas stepped in, but before that, it was a free-for-all.
My personal opinion, these people are not really vetted the way they should be.
Yeah.
You see all kinds of people, very questionable people. I'm not saying all of them are that way, but the majority, it's just not right to have them in here. No.
Yeah, we know people from terrorist watch lists, people with criminal backgrounds are coming, and again, they're released. Where do they go? They fan out throughout the country.
A lot of these people that you see, those young men, between the ages of 18 and 35 years old, and you can tell that these guys are coming in and they're not really the people that we want in the United States. They're criminal minds.
Yeah, it's a national security threat, obviously. We're seeing New York City, Chicago now, all these issues. But right here in Eagle Pass, Chief, last question, how is your department dealing with this? I imagine you've had to get everyone together and say, hey, it's a new reality now. We have a new challenge, and this is what we have to do. And how are the guys dealing with it? Like you said, they're finding babies dead in the Rio Grande, and some horrible things happen.
I can give you a good example of that. I've got one of my guys, Marcos Quipuros, he's one of our swiftwater rescue guys. He's been out to the river hundreds of times. One day, early in the morning, this guy never complains. He comes up to me and says, Chief, you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing dead bodies. And that hit me hard, because If this guy, this strong guy that's never complained, is complaining right now, what about the other guys, the newer guys that have been going out there? You know, mentally, it's getting to them.
Yeah. Those many dead found on the Rio Grande that Chief Mello described, where do they end up? We continued our ride along with Deputy Constable Hal Bowles, and we visited the local graveyard here in Eagle Pass. Take a look. We're here in Eagle Pass, Texas with Deputy Constable Hal Bowles. And Deputy, look, this I think may be the most sobering spot that you've taken us today. And you've taken us to many eye-opening places here in Eagle Pass, but this is an even different story. Why is this spot so important?
Well, where we're at here, Eric, is we're at our local county cemetery, and all these crosses, what you're looking at here, is looks can be deceiving, but for every plot that we have here, there's about 3 to 4 deceased interred in every plot. And what makes this part of the cemetery unique is these are people that are unidentified migrants that have crossed the border, that have lost their life trying to cross the border, whether they have drowned or crossed the border and passed away in the brush, that we've encountered them out there. And we've encountered men, women, children. Unfortunately, there's some infants here buried as well. In the end of 2020, at the end of 2022, we had roughly about 160 deceased here in Maverick County that we encountered coming across the border. And normally, what we do in our law enforcement part of the job is when we come across a deceased, our local justice of the peace, local magistrate will give a time of death, date and time of death, and they'll usually order an autopsy. And it got to the point where we would send the people for autopsy to either San Antonio or Laredo, which is Bexar County or Webb County, Laredo. And they basically said, hey, we're not gonna do it anymore. We're flooded with people all up and down the border. If you wanna wait for an autopsy, it's gonna be about a year to a year and a half. So they stopped sending people. It got to the point where our local funeral homes, we only have 2, they stopped accepting people because they were so flooded with the number of deceased that we were getting literally every day, every other day.
A year and a half just to get an autopsy.
Yes,
and
year and a half.
Yeah, and 3 or 4 people
Yes.
in each of these graves.
Yes, and the majority of these people here are unidentified. They're John Does, Jane Does, unfortunately baby John Doe, baby Jane Does as well.
Central America,
Central
South
America, South America, you name it. You know, you name the country, they're probably here.
And folks, regardless of your political affiliation, this affects everyone. This is a human issue. It's an American issue. People are dying here, and 3 to 4 in a grave. The people of Eagle Pass are desperate. They're doing what they can, but they're overwhelmed. Do the people of Eagle Pass, in some respects, feel abandoned by the federal government?
Yeah, that's a big question that comes up a lot, and people ask themselves and they say, why was this allowed to happen in the first place? Whereas before, in years before, it didn't happen. The federal government did their part and everything was fine. And why all of a sudden did this become an issue? And that's the question what's on everybody's mind. And it didn't just turn into an issue, it ballooned from a small little problem into this huge problem that's not just being dealt with here in Eagle Pass, but now all over the country. So now we're starting to feel the after effects of this. Unfortunately, when you have a large number of people come through, you're going to have more problems because, and that's what happens in the larger cities are experiencing. They're getting a taste of what we've been experiencing.
We are coming to you from Eagle Pass, Texas. This is really in many ways the epicenter of the border crisis here on the USMexico border. And again, folks, this is part 1 of a 3-part series. Tomorrow night, Pastor Sammy Rodriguez will join us here on the border to give a Christian response. How should the body of Christ respond to this crisis that is affecting both sides of the border? And then we will wrap up with the former Department of Homeland Security head Chad Wolf here on Thursday, so you won't want to miss it. But a quick thought as we go here, folks. We're a nation of laws. Number 1, hey, Leviticus says, welcome the immigrant, but Romans 13, also very clear. We are a nation of laws, and we must obey the laws of the nation that we are living in. That's being broken right now, so there's a lot of issues to discuss. Number one, the human element. We talked about people on terror watch lists crossing the border, fentanyl flooding in from the border, human, drugs, sex trafficking, a lot of issues. Again, people suffering on both sides of the border, people dying right behind me trying to cross into the United States, and our government not doing too much about it. Some would say actually encouraging what's happening right now. It seems to make no sense, but we'll get to the bottom of it over the next 3 nights right here on Stakelbeck Tonight. So again, tomorrow night, don't miss it. Pastor Sammy Rodriguez is here. Then we will wrap up this very important 3-part series on an issue that matters to every American. It matters to you from right here on the U.S. border, U.S.-Mexico border, I should say. And until tomorrow night, thanks so much for joining us. Keep Eagle Pass. Keep this entire region in your prayers. God bless you.